Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good day. So today we're going to cover a new topic on the quality system management course called benchmark. So this particular topic is quite interesting because it shows you how you can achieve the performance of your competitor by performing this benchmark process. So let's look at a quick definition what benchmark is all about. So benchmarking is measuring your performance against best in class company. So the first thing that you have to do in during benchmarking is actually comparing your performance against the best in class company. So if you are in the, let's say for example, in the automotive business, then maybe the best in class company with regards to automotive is Toyota. So you can compare your performance against Toyota performance and determine how the best in class achieve those performance levels. So you're not only comparing your performance, but you also need to dig in deeper to understand how the best in class company achieve those performance levels, how they become the best, right? And using the information as the basis of your own company's target strategies and implementations. And you use those informations, understanding, what are the practices that being utilized by the best in class company, and use that as the basis of forming your strategy and company operational implementations such that you can improve your company performance towards the best in class. So that's what benchmarking is all about. The benchmarking concept can also be explained using this particular diagram. So basically what need to happen for during the benchmarking process is you need to know what is your performance level. So depending on what indicators are you monitoring, let's say for example quality indicators, productivity indicators, then you have to know what's your performance level, and then you have to really understand your process, what's your process, either be it your manufacturing process, your business process, so on and so forth, right? So this is the first thing that you need to do for benchmarking to happen. And then you find the best in class of your industry. So those that you want to benchmark, right? And you understand what are their performance levels. And these performance levels must be comparable to the performance level in your organizations, so that then you can compare them. And you have to understand how they managed to get the best in class performance level. How did they get there? Right? So by having those information, understanding what's your performance levels and what's the process, business process in your organizations, and understanding what is the performance levels of your benchmark company. Usually, this is a best in class company, and how they get there, what are their business process, so on and so forth. Then having those informations, then you do creative adaptation. So creative adaptation is basically looking for opportunity to improve your process based on what's being practiced by the benchmark company, right? So based on that, then you might want to change your strategy, your business process, so on and so forth, and define that as the improvement plan. So this is what happened during the creative adaptation, right? So then you implement those strategy and plan, and you should be able to get breakthrough performance, meaning that you should be able to improve your performance level towards the performance level of the best in class, or even exceeding it. Right? So that's basically the benchmark concept that can be explained using this diagram. So the main objective of benchmarking process is to understand the competitor's strength and how they operate. And whenever it's beneficial, to adapt and build upon their excellent practice for your company's use. So you want to understand how the best in the class or your competitor do it, and what their strength, and where it is beneficial, because you don't have to copy everything. You don't have to take uh, all the practices that's being done by your competitor, but you have to be selective whenever it is beneficial only. Then adapt and build upon their excellent practice for your company use. So that's the main objective of benchmark. So what can benchmarking do? So traditionally, um, how do you plan for a next year goal? So most of the company, what they do is they extrapolate uh, last year performance, and then based on last year performance, maybe they say that I'm going to increase uh, uh, 10% of my performance for next year goal. Meaning, for example, if the output of their productions for this year is 1 million units, then basically the goal for next year would be 1 million and 1.1 million units. But rather than doing that, you can do benchmarking process. And if you do benchmarking process, then you can actually set the goal based on what the industry standard is. So you compare your performance against the best best in the industry performance. So you're not looking at your own performance, but you look upwardsly, right? So that you can become more competitive against your competitor. So benchmarking allows goals to be set objectively based on external and internal information, right? So basically, that's the main thing that benchmark will allow you to do. So benchmarking is a tool to achieve business and competitive objectives by doing what? By comparing and measure your business performance against world-class company. So you don't look back what your company did last year to plan for next year, but you compare and measure your business performance against world-class company. Right? It allows you to highlight areas where your business performance is suboptimal. So by doing the benchmarking process, then you can really identify objectively what part of your operations that need improvement. Highlight worldwide best practice that lead to the superior performance. So rather than inventing something new to improve your performance, you can actually copy with pride what has been done right or correctly by other companies to improve your performance. That will cut short of the development time, and also the money spent to improve performance of your organizations. Help to continuously improve your performance, introduce new ideas. So basically, if you keep on and benchmarking process is not one time deal, it's a continuous process. So by doing that, then basically you're going to continuously improve your performance. So benchmarking is a continuous process, as I mentioned just now, and it leads to openness to a new ideas. So when you do this, you have to be go in with open-mindedness, because it will expose the weakness of your company, right? But then you learn, once you recognize which area is a weak area in the organizations, then you fix it, and only then you can improve it, right? benchmarking can be applied to both manufacturing and service industry. So benchmarking process has been practiced both in manufacturing or in service industries. So doesn't matter which industries you are involved in, benchmarking process can be used and applied, and is being applied widely. In achieving the objective of benchmark, these are the key elements during benchmarking process. There are two of them. The first one is define performance measurement of units of measure. So that's the first thing that you need to do. You need to define the performance measurement of unit measure. So these are called metrics are expressed numerically. So whatever you define as a performance measurement must be quantifiable in numerical numbers. For example, if you're talking about quality, maybe the yield in percentage. If you're talking about productivity, maybe a number of output per number of headcount. So maybe 10 units per headcount. So must be numerical, must be able to be expressed numerically. The numbers achieved by the best in class benchmark are called target. So basically, the best in class performance measurement, let's say for example yield, again, if in automotive industry, then the best in class may be a Toyota, right? Then you can look at the number of defect. Maybe one of the defect performance is number of defect at the end of assembly line, right? So if Toyota is the number of defect is maybe one every 1,000 cars, then basically that's the setting, that's the target that you want to achieve, right? And it must be able to be expressed numerically. And an organization seeking improvement then plot its own performance against the target. Then you compare your performance against the target and see how much gap there are between you and the best in class. So the second benchmark key element is understand the reason for performance differs. So after you identify the performance measure and you compare yours and the best in class, and there's a difference in the performance measure. For example, if you're talking about the quality just now, let's say for example Toyota just now, one defect per 1,000 cars, and your performance is 10 defects per 1,000 car. So there's difference in performance. So what you need to do is you need to understand the reason for the performance differs. For this, then basically during the benchmarking process, they must develop in-depth knowledge of both your own process and the best-in-class process. So you have to first really understand your process and then understand the best-in-class company process. And then you compare the difference between the two processes and try to understand the difference that allows manager to organize their improvement efforts to meet goal. So if you understand the difference between the two processes, then you can attribute the differences to the difference in the performance measure. And by understanding that, then basically you can actually define your improvement efforts to achieve the goal. What's the goal? The goal is basically the best in class performance. So benchmarking is about setting goal and objectives and about meeting them by improving the process. So in the benchmark, there must be two key elements. One is you need to define the performance measurement, and you compare the performance measurement between what your company currently achieve and the best in class performance, right? And define if there is a gap between. So then you understand the reason for the for the difference in performance. Usually you look at the different process. So you need to understand your internal process, and you need to understand the best in class organization processes, and you compare the processes, right? And if you can find out and identify where you are lacking, then basically you can actually adapt what's being done right by your best in class organizations. And basically then you define a plan on how to improve that particular area, and by doing that, hopefully your performance measurement can also improve, right? After talking about all the greatness about benchmark, there is weakness in benchmark process. And the primary weakness of benchmarking process is the best in class performance is a moving target. Meaning the best in class performance, let's say for example Toyota is best in class in terms of automotive manufacturing, right? Let's say for example in terms of quality of the automotive, they are best in class. But what does it mean? It means that the quality of Toyota keep on changing. Toyota will keep on improving its quality. So when you benchmark the Toyota company, then basically once you benchmark them, the process might change, right? So the best that you can perform going to be the same as what Toyota performed before this, prior to this, right? And it's going to be very hard for you to overtake the performance of Toyota if you just use benchmarking techniques, right? Because you're copying their process, you learn from them. So it's going to be very hard for you to outperform the best in class company. So for the functions that's critical to and to the business mission, organization must continue to innovate as well as imitate. So when you talk about benchmarking process, you're talking about basically imitating, right? You try to copy what's the best practice available in the best in class organizations, such that you can improve your performance, right? So in order for you to be ahead of the competitor, then you cannot just imitate. You need to innovate, and innovate is totally different matter, yeah, compared to benchmarking. You need to just to be creative and innovative, so on and so forth. So for a function that's critical for the business mission for your organizations, you cannot just depend on benchmarking process if you want to be the best in your class. You have to innovate. You have to innovate. So that's the one of the weaknesses in benchmarking, because if you benchmark something, then a company, then basically you're going to be at par with that company, right? So in order for you to be ahead of that company, then you have to innovate, not only imitate. So this is one of the weaknesses in benchmarking process. So let's shift gear a bit and go into a bit more depth on this particular topic. So we're going to, for the next few slides, we're going to look into the benchmark process steps. Basically, there are you can classify the process step into 6 steps. One is decide. You have to decide what to benchmark. So you have to make decisions what you want to benchmark because you have limited time. So there are only so many things that you can benchmark when you do it. Especially when you go on site on the company that you want to benchmark. So you might have like a day or two to do that. So you have to decide what to benchmark. Second, you need to understand the current performance. Basically, this is very, very important. You need to understand your internal performance, your internal company performance before you go out and benchmark. And then only then you can start to understand the companies that you benchmark performance. Then you can compare them. Right. Third is planning. Fourth is study others. Fifth, learn from other data from the data. And lastly is use the findings. We're going to go into a bit more detail on individual steps after this. So the first step is what to benchmark. The good starting point for you to decide what to benchmark is basically by looking at your company missions and critical success factor. So that's the good starting point. So because again, as I mentioned just now, you only have limited resources and time to do benchmark. So you have to be very selective in what you want to benchmark against other company. Right? So the good starting point is looking at the mission and critical success factor of your company. Because most organizations have a strategy that defines how to position itself uh, to compete in the marketplace. And that's basically the mission and vision statement. And in supporting that mission and vision statement is a set of critical activities. And basically, this is called critical success factor. So these are the important factors, important items in your company mission and vision. So these are the good starting point for you to define what do you want to benchmark against the best in the industry. Example. One example here is insurance organizations A, and let's say the visions of this organization is to become the speediest in the business to do in the industry to do business with. So they want to be the speediest, meaning that the critical success factor in this particular case for this organization A. So let's say this is your organizations, and the vision is to become the speediest in the industry to do business with. And the critical success factor to support this vision could be fast payment of claim, database system that can relate informations on the policy held by its customer. So if you have this database system, if the company file a claim, then basically you can actually call out the informations on that particular policy, your customer policy, and in a timely manner, right? Because everything is digitalized. So with this, then you can reduce the cycle time. So these are the critical success factor to support the vision of organization A. So with that in mind, then if you want to do benchmarking, then most probably benchmarking a customer service process would have a substantial impact on the vision. So if you want to benchmark other company best in class, then basically this is maybe the items, the focus that you want to have, where you want to go into your the company that you want to benchmark and understand their customer service process, so that you can learn from them if they are best in class. Another example, if insurance organization, still insurance organization, but the vision is a bit different. Rather than to be the speediest in the industry to the business with, but the vision is to be the best in investment performance and reduce the cost of insurance. So insurance organization B, rather than focusing on the speediest in industry to the business with, they're focusing on the best investment performance, so that they can reduce the cost on insurance. So they are planning to win the customer by offering the best insurance rate, right? So the critical success factor for this particular company might be hiring and training a good financial manager so they can do a good investment planning, using telecommunication to track and act on development of global money market, right? So again, this is to support to be the best in investment performance. Development of online real-time information system and expert forecasting. So company B is an insurance organizations, but the vision is totally different than organization A. So if organization B wants to do benchmark, then basically the critical success factor would be different compared to organization A. And in this case, rather than focusing on the customer service process as what company A should be doing, company B might want to benchmark the investment process of the best in class. So that's basically this is basically the good starting point for you to define what do you want to benchmark, right? Based on the vision and mission of your organizations and the critical success factor of your organizations. Then you focus on that, and you define that as the focus of your benchmark activities. Other than the mission and vision and critical factors based on mission and vision statement, the question on what to benchmark also can come from these answering these questions. Some of the questions that can be raised to decide high impact area of benchmark are as the following. So the first one is which process are causing the most trouble. So basically, based on data, internal data, you know which process are the most troublesome for you, right? And maybe that's one of the area that you want to focus on when you want to benchmark best in class. Then you can learn from them on how to address the issue, or which process contribute most to the customer satisfactions and which are not performing up to expectation. So maybe based on your own internal survey, then basically you know that the customer uh, 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 would like a particular area to be improved the most, which is not performing up to expectation. For example, you can have a survey. If you're in automotive service area, you can have a survey asking the customer, which area is the most important area for them, and maybe they say that it's waiting time, right? Is the most important area, and you can when you look at your data, your performance with regards to waiting time for the customer to service their car is long, right? And the customer complain about that. So maybe that's the focus that you want to have, how to address the issue with regards to waiting time for service of customer. Another questions that you might ask is what are the competitive pressure impacting the organization the most? So what are the competitive pressure that's impacting your organization the most? Is it the cost? So you are being pressured in terms of cost. So your customer keep on comparing the cost to purchase a car of a similar standard against your competitor, and you found out that you are having you're not winning in that particular area, right? So basically, then you can benchmark in the best in class organizations and understand how do they manage cost. Or the other questions that might be the good indication of what you want to benchmark against is what process or functions have the most potential for differentiating our organizations from the competitors. So maybe you have internal discussions and you say that, okay, we want to be excel in our business and to be known among industry to be the best in certain area, right? So basically, then you want to benchmark that particular area against your customer. For example, if you want to be the best in terms of warranty management or warranty management of your product, that you want to be known for that. Then basically, then when you want to go benchmark, then maybe you want to benchmark that particular area against your competitor so that you can understand what they are doing, and you can offer a package that's much more attractive compared to your competitor or best in class. So these are some of the questions that you can use to identify what benchmark area you want to focus on, other than the critical factors that arise in supporting the vision and mission statement of your organization. As I mentioned earlier, when you perform benchmarking process, you have limited time, and you should actually define your timeline in doing benchmark. When you want to start, when you want to end, right? Because benchmark, you shouldn't do benchmark forever. You need to have some conclusions out of that and get the result of that particular benchmarking process. So one of the things that you have to consider on deciding what you want to benchmark is the benchmarking study should be done in timely manner. So you must have a specific time limit, and you have to what you want to benchmark must be within that time limit, right? So because of that, when you define what to benchmark, you need to limit the scope of the study to choose, whether is a broad and shallow scope, or is narrow and deep scope. So you have to decide that. You can do both, but it must be within the time limitation that you have. So the broad and shallow study usually asks what is done, and spend many functions and people, and do not go into detail in the area in any one area. So usually you do this a broad and shallow study if you want to develop strategies, setting goals, and reorganizing functions to be more effective. Right? So if this is one of the goal of your benchmark, develop strategy, setting goal, reorganization functions, so on and so forth. And usually this is much related to the critical strategy in understanding in supporting the vision and mission, right? That you should do the broad and shallow studies. So you hit many areas, but your questions during benchmark should be shallow, should not be too detailed. So if the objective of your study of your benchmark is to change how people perform their jobs, they say you identify a trouble area in the organizations, and you want to define a new ways of performing that particular task, right? So you can improve your indicator. So that's basically changing how people perform their jobs. And what you then, for this particular case, you should do narrow and deep study. And the question that you ask is how it is done, and explore into a few aspects of the process function. So basically, if you want to do that, change how people perform their jobs, then you go for narrow and deep study and ask how it is done, and very focus on a few aspects of the process or function. Right? You can mix both also. Some Because some benchmarking teams start with a broad and shallow scope and identify few areas of particular interest to do a narrow and deep study. So you can also mix this particular approach. What you do is first you go broad and shallow scope, and then you identify areas that you want to go in depth. So then you basically focus on that particular few areas only. So you can mix the two approach. Other benchmarking teams identify few narrow and deep target immediately based on existing data or experience. And you can also basically focus on a particular area and go in depth in that particular area for narrow and deep benchmarking process, right? So the key thing is you need to understand that the benchmarking study should be done in timely manner. You should have a time limitation, and usually you have time limitation because the best in class don't want to entertain you forever, so you have to put time limit, right? And due to that, then you have to limit the scope of your study. You can go either broad and shallow or narrow and depth, depending on your intention. So if you are talking about developing new strategies, setting goals, so on and so forth, then you want to go broad and shallow. But if you want to define a very specific process change in your organization, then you go narrow and deep. The second step in a benchmarking process is to understand your current performance. So this is actually the prerequisite to benchmarking process. So before you can embark on benchmarking process, you have to make sure that you understand your internal process first. And there are many ways that you can do this. Some of the proposed techniques is use flow diagram or cause and effect diagram. So examples, if you are in the business of car manufacturing, then you need to have the process flow of how car is being assembled. If you are in the business of, let's say, for example, insurance, then maybe you need to have a process flow on how claim filing is being processed. So you need to really understand your process. Um, you have to identify circumstances that results in exceptions to the normal routine. So if you have a standard process flow on how to do those things that I mentioned just now, there might be exception to the case. So what if something happened? Let's say, for example, what if during the claim of the during in the insurance claim, the your customer do not have the photographic evidence of the damage, then how to proceed with that. So if there's exceptions to the normal routine, you need to specify that, right? Because exceptions commonly consume a good deal of process resources, right? So because exceptions usually require you to do additional process steps, so that's why it's very important for you to understand what's the exceptions to the normal routine, if there is any, and that can be some of the items that you want to benchmark on how other people's doing it, right? So that's the first thing. prerequisite to understand the current performance. First thing is you need to understand your internal organization process and document it. Secondly, you need to have a team members, right? You need to have team members, and the team members should comprise of those who own or work in the process to ensure suggested changes are actually implemented. So it's very important. Once you decide what to benchmark, right? Let's say you want to focus on certain areas. So in the, let's say for example, your company is dealing with insurance claim, and you want to focus on the claim department. So the team member of your benchmark group, must some of it must come from the claim department, because whatever finding that you're going to have need to be implemented by the team department. So it's much easier for them to accept the proposed change if the team members is a part of the if the members from the claim department is part of the team members of the benchmarking group that's making the suggestion. So that's very important. And it's also is important for the person from the claim department to be there, because they are the content expert in that particular area, so that during discussions during benchmarking process, then the content expert is there to ask the appropriate questions, and to dig in deeper to understand the process of the best in class company that you are benchmark against. And another thing that's under the understanding of current performance is documentations. So this is very very important, because without documentations, then without proper documentations, then basically your findings at the end of the benchmarking process, it's going to be very hard for you to come up with the conclusions of the finding. So outputs and inputs must be quantifiable. Units of measure must be determined. So in the documentations, one of the most important thing is the output and input must be quantifiable, right? And units of measure must be determined. So you have to be very specific on the unit, and also the output and inputs measurement. Common examples include unit costs, hourly rates, asset measures, and quality measures. In some cases, important measurement measures are not available or unclear. So you need to deal with that if it's unavailable or unclear. So if you are dealing with manufacturing, for example, and one of the manufacturing area that you want to benchmark is the cost of the cost of your operation. So you might want to understand what's a unit cost, right? And you need to understand what constitutes the unit cost, right? So it must be very very specific, such that once you want to request that information from from the company that you want to benchmark, then apple to apple comparison can be done. Right? For example, if you didn't quantify this, for example, if you want to measure productivity, right? So productivities can be measured in many ways, right? So in productivity, maybe you want to identify the units measurement for productivity is going to be number of unit output per number of direct labor, right? So that when you want to compare the productivity number between your organizations and the organizations you're doing benchmark to, then what the units that you're looking for is output of a product per direct labor, not output of product per labor, but direct labor only. So that's the reason why the output and input must be quantifiable, and unit measurement must be determined. Right? So the next step is planning process. Basically, up to now, what you do, what we have been doing and discussing is the internal process. So once internal process are understood and documented, now it's possible to make decisions on how to conduct the study. So by now, we should be able to, identify a benchmarking team that to be chosen. So as mentioned just now, the part of the benchmarking team should be the content expert in the particular area that you want to benchmark. The team should decide what type of benchmarking to perform. So this is again we talked about this before, the what to benchmark. So it can be wide and shallow, or deep and focused benchmarking process. What type of data to be collected and methods of data collection. So basically, this is depending on the intentions of the benchmark, as we discussed before. And by now, we should be able to identify the organizations and candidates to serve as a benchmark. Need- So basically, by now we should know who's the best in class organizations that you want to benchmark, the candidates. And finally, by now we should be able to put down the timetable upon each of the benchmarking task and desired output from the study. So up to now, all these are being done internally by your group, by your group. And next step is benchmark planning process. And benchmark planning is actually a learning process. And the entire purpose of benchmark itself is to learn. And at this particular stage, uh, there is a tendency that you want to call the identified organizations to schedule a visit for the benchmark, and this is not prudent. So, what you need to do at the planning stage, at this particular stage, is actually to use informations in the public domain to focus the inquiry and to find appropriate benchmark partners. So at this particular time, rather than start to calling few organizations for you to benchmark against, is wise for you to use information from the public domain, from the internet, from the company background, from the case study on the company, from the company profile. Learn that first before you approach a company and schedule for a visit, so that you can actually streamline and focus on the appropriate organizations and appropriate data that you want to collect. So you don't want to waste time in visiting them and found out that maybe it's not a good match, is between what you want, what information you want to gather, and the company that you benchmark. So you need to do some homework first, using information from the public domain, from their website, from the internet, from case study on the company, so on and so forth. So you can find from public domain, for example, internet, newspaper, magazines, so on and so forth. And so you need to do that at the planning stage. And basically, there are three types of benchmarking process that you can actually do. One is you can benchmark with regards to internal. benchmarking. So internal benchmarking means that, so if if you in your organizations there are many different groups or many different sites. For example, if you are, let's say for example, Toyota car manufacturer, they have Toyota that assemble a car in Japan, Toyota that assemble car in United States, so on and so forth, right? So actually, you can benchmark against internal department or internal entity of your company, right? And learn from them also. So, for example, if they say, for example, with regards to quality, Toyota Japan quality is much better compared to Toyota USA, then maybe Toyota USA wants to benchmark against the Toyota Japan internal process and see what's the difference, and try to improve their performance using internal benchmarking process. That's one. The other type of benchmarking process is you benchmark against your competitor. So you can identify your competitor. Let's say, for example, Proton, the car manufacturing, can benchmark against Toyota or against Honda. So that's competitor. That's competitive benchmark process. So this has some pluses and some minuses, and we're going to look into that after this. Or you can benchmark, you can process. So you don't benchmark against company that have the same product, similar product market segmentations as you're offering, but you benchmark against a company that has similar process. Example, for example, if you are in the process in the business of logistic, meaning that like for example, the DHLs and so forth. So if you want to benchmark against another company focusing on the particular process, maybe you want to benchmark against Dell Computer, because Dell Computer, even though they offer different services, but Dell is known as one of the organization that has a very good logistical setup, meaning that they can deliver their goods to their customer in very efficient manner. So rather than focusing on the type of product, similar product offered by the company, you focus on process. Which company offer which company has the best in class of that particular process, and you want to benchmark against that. So we're going to talk in a bit detail in terms of in under planning, under the planning topic of the internal competitor and process benchmarking approach. For the internal benchmarking, you're looking for similar activities that are performed in different operating divisions, as I mentioned just now. So if you have let's say for example manufacturing site of manufacturing activities at different sites, then you can benchmark others. Or even if you have examples in the Bell Labs, if you have defined best in class with regards to a business process, or with regards to techniques being done by a group or individual, then you can benchmark that against either group or individual to improve performance of your organizations. The examples for this Bell Labs is organizations that's in United States, and what they do is they benchmark among the engineers in the organizations, and they identify the engineers with best in class with regards to the work and social habits of the best performers. So what they do is they train engineers to copy the work and the social habit of the best performers. Some of the best habits, as simple as managing work in basket, accepting constructive criticism, and seeking help instead of wasting time. So this is something that I think any organizations can do, and they can actually improve the performance of the whole group by looking at the best performers in that particular group and benchmark against that best performers work habit and social habit, right? So the and based on this particular benchmark exercise that's being done in the Bell Labs, they found out that engineers who went through the Bell Labs program boosted their productivity by 10% in 8 months. So you can see the return of investment in terms of the internal benchmark activity, as simple as this, right? And one good thing about there are a few advantages about the internal comparison, internal benchmark. One is data easily obtained. So since your benchmark against organizations or individuals that works in the same organizations, then it's very easy for you to share data. It's quite easy for you to share data. So that's one good thing about it. And secondly, it generates immediate improvement ideas or defines common problems that help to focus internal, external inquiries. So basically, if you do this internally, then basically the improvement ideas can be defined, and basically you can implement it almost right away. And if you do internal benchmark as such, you might you might realize a common problem that faced by all the organizations or all the workers in that particular organizations. So if this common problem can be identified based on the internal benchmarking process, then basically this can be identified as one of the benchmark area that you want to compare with external organizations. So once you're done with this, let's say for internal benchmark, you say there's a common problem in all sites that you are facing, and you cannot find the solutions internally. So what you can do, the identified common problem can be one of the benchmark area that you want to focus on when you do external benchmark, right? So that's what it meant by this. So just now we talked about internal benchmarking process. So there's also you can also do a competitor benchmarking process. So in the competitors benchmarking process, you actually select organizations that offer the same product or services as yours, and you benchmark them. So organization survival depends on its performance relative to the competitor. So basically, this is a sticky issue when it comes to benchmarking process against your competitor, because since the survival of the company depends on your performance against your competitor in terms of grabbing the market shares and so forth, then some competitors want to share their information with you, because you're competing with them. So, but there are companies, there are industries that readily share their information with each other. For example, in banking sector, mortgage bankers compare their product types, service fees, and interest rate on weekly basis, and you can find this on internet. Right? But there are some companies that are very reluctant to share their proprietary information with you. But there are several ways to obtain the data. Good source information from public domain and third party. For example, if you want to look at the features of various products, then you can go to consumer reports that evaluates the performance of your competitors' product. Uh, Morningstars evaluates the financial performance of various stocks. So this is basically an article in a paper that in paper magazine that evaluates financial performance of various stocks. So you can actually get that information from the public domain or third party source. So in automotive comparison in terms of product performance, then we have JD Powers, a third party that evaluate automobile customer satisfaction level. And You can also, if the information is not in public domain, what you can do is actually you can buy the competitor product and take it apart and test. So this is not the common practice on how to get informations about a product and compare it with yours. So this is an example of benchmarking process. But there are also companies in similar industry that readily share information with each other. For example, in the semiconductor industry. So in semiconductor industry, then it's very common for you to benchmark each other. So, for example, Intel organizations might have agreement to benchmark against Motorola or Samsung, right? But then if you do that, then basically you also have to share your informations with the competitor. They would request that. So it's a benchmark. Both is two ways of benchmarking, meaning that you share your information with them, they share their information with you, and basically, hopefully, the whole industry will progress further. So the third benchmarking process approach is process benchmarking. The process benchmarking is also known as the functional or generic benchmarking. And the idea behind this is basically you can benchmark among different organizations who offer different products based on the processes. So the idea is that many processes are common across industry boundaries. So it doesn't matter, whether it's automotive industry, electronics industry, so on and so forth. There are some common processes among them, and uh, and um, and the innovations and also the finding from other types of organizations offering different product can be applied across industry. For example, um, every industry has a payroll and accounts receivable function. Every industry has HR function, so on and so forth. So all kinds of organizations design new product and have logistical functions, right? So you don't have to in the process of benchmarking, you don't have to consider the similar product offering or service offering by the organizations that you want to benchmark. What you do is just focus on a particular process. A classical example of this is when Southwest Airline was unhappy with the airplane turnaround time. It benchmarked motor racing pit crew and implemented many new ideas. So, uh, Northwest Airlines is the airlines in the United States, and basically based on their internal data, the turnaround, meaning that so when the plane arrived at its destination, you unload the passengers luggage, so on and so forth. You clean up the plane to get ready for it to fly again. So that's the turnaround time. How much time does it take to prepare the plane for the next flight? So Northwest Airlines is not happy with the time taken for the turnaround time. So what they do, they benchmark auto racing pit crew, and implemented many new ideas. So they look at how pit crew from auto racing, from this, for example, F1, F1 motorsports, when they do when they want to change tires. All right, so the pit crew has was given only a few seconds, to do it. The faster they can do it, the better it is. So they are measuring the time of the necessary changes, be it changing tire or fill up the fuel, in seconds, in a fraction of seconds. So Southwest Airlines actually benchmark those process, and actually implemented many new ideas. Another examples is Motorola benchmark Domino Pizza. So Motorola offering electronics devices and product, and Domino Pizza is offering pizza, and Federal Express is actually delivering mails and goods, right? So Motorola look into Domino Pizza, Federal Express for the best way to speed up delivery system. So even though they are offering a different product, but all of them has a delivery system, a delivery function. So Domino Pizza and Federal Express is known to have a very good delivery system, and Motorola wants to improve its. So basically, Motorola benchmark Domino Pizza and Federal Express. So that's examples of a process benchmark. The other example is Remington Rifle Company. So Remington Rifle is the company that make rifles and make bullets, make guns, and make bullets. So they actually benchmark Maybelline Cosmetics, so two totally different company that offering two totally different product. One is guns and bullet. The other one is cosmetic. But Remington Rifle actually benchmarked Maybelline cosmetic shiny lipstick cartridge production process. So Maybelline, they produce lipstick. So the lipstick is stored in the cartridge. So basically the cartridge for the lipstick is very cosmetically very appealing. So Remington Rifle Company, when they make a bullet, they want to make a shinier rifle shell. So they learn from Maybelline on how to do that. So again, it's another example of extremely different product offering by two different organizations, but they managed to actually benchmark each other, looking at a particular process. So process benchmarking has several advantages. One of it is it is much easier to get organizations to share information, because they are not competitor. They are not direct competitors of each other. For example, Remington Rifle Company is not direct competitor of Maybelline. Motorola is not direct competitor of Domino Pizza and Federal Express. So it's much easier for them to share information. Right? The second advantage, it is relatively easy to find organizations with world-class operation through published information and through discussion with suppliers, consultants who specialize in that particular field. So it says that it's easy for you to identify organizations with a specific a world-class operation. For example, who's the best in logistics? Then we know Federal Express, and Domino Pizza deliver product, in hourly, even in minutes, right? So it's much easier for you to find organizations with world-class operation just focus on that particular specific process. rather than the similar product line. And you can get information from published information and through discussion with suppliers and consultants who specialize in that particular field. So this is a process benchmark, and this is a third kind of benchmarking process that you can pursue. So there are three of them. First one is internal benchmarking. Second one just now is competitors benchmarking, and the third one is a process benchmarking. So one of the areas that need to be addressed at the planning stage is how to identify best in class. So again, so we want to benchmark against the best in class, be it our competitor, be it internal benchmarking, be it process benchmarking. We need to identify the best in class. So how to do that? Basically, the way to do it is basically you have to find it. You need research. You need to research it. There's no existing magic list of best in class company. So you need to find, you need to research organizations that are best in class performance relative to the defined measure established by using critical success factor. So you have already identified what to be benchmark. So you need to find the organizations that are the best performer relative to what's being defined as a critical success factor just now. And you can find this information, the best practice can be found internally if you're doing an internal benchmark in competitors or in the industry. Um, and basically you can get this information by many means, through many means. Where to search? One is you can start with publicly available informations. For example, at the trade journals on the internet. Uh, there's magazines that published for the industry, occupations and functions. So go into the magazines for that particular specific industry. If you're looking for benchmark against specific industry, industrial partner or competitors. And you can also get numerous benchmarking database, such as in the Industry Week survey of manufacturers benchmarking database. So there's this particular database that actually have the industry survey of various manufacturers. Or you can go to government agencies who also compile large quantities of industry informations. And basically, you can go into government publications in their website, and by talking directly to the government expert. So all this information is basically readily available out there. Or you can do what you can do is you have a business contact, you have a suppliers, consultant, customer that can actually point the way to the organization that has a best practice in a particular area that you want to benchmark, right? So basically, you need to basically the bottom line is to identify the best in class. You need to do benchmarking. You have to do some research in doing so. For example, if you want to find the biggest manufacturer in semiconductor, then there's that information is available out there. What you have to find, you have to search for it. So the planning process in identifying the best in class should result in a short list of possible benchmark partners. So you don't want to have too many of them. So you want to have a very short list of possible candidates as a benchmark partner. Don't limit yourself to one, because if you approach that one company and they say no, then basically you do not have a backup plan. So do a short list, a few of them, so that you have options, just in case if some of them turn you down, if you have to do face-to-face benchmarking exercise later on, right? So we have gone through three steps of a benchmarking process. The first one is to figure out when to be benchmarked. Secondly is to understand your internal current process first. And third step is planning. So the fourth step on the benchmarking process is studying others. So when you benchmark, there are two set of information that you're seeking for. One is descriptions of how best in class process are being practiced, and second one is the measurable results out of these practices. So if you remember, this is similar to what we discussed when we talked about understanding current practice and processes. Because when we do that, then basically we try to understand as much as possible about our own processes, internal processes, and the critical factors that we want to measure. What are those, and the units of measurement for those critical factors. The reason why we do that, because we want to compare it with these informations that we are talking about just now, which is the process of the best in class, and the other one is the measurable results of these practices of the best in class organizations, right? And during seeking of this information, as mentioned earlier, you need to use internal sources or data from public domain first. So do this first, get data on your identified best in class organization using your internal sources or data from the public domain, right? The original research is basically the first-hand informations of data that you gather from the organizations. So prior of doing that, then you have to get the data from the public domain, so on and so forth first, right? And in most cases, during the benchmarking process, in studying the other companies' process and performance, you need to use a combination of the sources, your original research, and the readily available data information from the public domain. And while seeking this information, you need to make sure that you consider the cost and time involved in gathering the data, and the need for the appropriate data quality and accuracy. So these are the two considerations that you need to pay attention: cost and time. Because if you can gather data from the public domain, then the cost and time involved is minimal. But if you want to travel to your to other organizations, and to benchmark, which is the original research on that organizations, then basically it's going to cost you more, and it's going to incur more time for the process. And the need for the appropriate data quality and accuracy. So if you want data quality and accuracy, then most often than not, you can get this if you do original research rather than take information from the public domain. So again, internal and public sources should have been examined first during planning process, so that if you have to go if you have to obtain original data, original research from the best in class organizations that you identify, then you have a good idea as what additional information should be collected. So once you go through the information available in the public domain, then basically the first-hand data that you want to gather from the best-in-class organizations that you have identified will be to fill in the blank, to fill in the gap of the data that you already have from the public domain. So with that, then basically you're going to save cost and time um, in seeking the original data from that organization. So if you have to perform the original research, meaning that getting data directly from your best-in-class organizations that you have identified, then there are three techniques that you can use to conduct the original research. And you can use this technique individually, independently, or you can use combinations of them. Okay, so the three techniques is, the first one is questionnaire, and you can do this by mail, by telephone, or in person, right? And this is usually done when data are desired from many external organizations using a third party to collect the information. So you can design the questionnaire and you can use third party to ask that, to distribute or ask that question to the benchmark organizations. So this is one very commonly used techniques in benchmarking. Or the questionnaire also can be developed as the preparations for a site visit, as a checklist during site visit, or as a follow-up device. So you can actually combine the questionnaire and the site visit. So prior to your visit to the benchmarked organization, then you can distribute this questionnaire first to get the initial informations. And then basically when you perform the site visit, then you can ask clarification question to further explain the information, to clarify the information that you get from the questionnaire. Or as a follow-up device. So questionnaire also can be used as a follow-up device after your visit. So it can be used prior to your visit, or a checklist during your visit, or a follow-up device after your visit. So let's say, for example, if you pay a visit to the benchmark organizations, and based on the conversations, based on the interview that you did, when you want to analyze the data, there are still questions about the data, on how they do certain stuff, so on and so forth. So you can use questionnaire as a follow-up device. Okay, and a careful design and interpretations of the questionnaire are very essential, especially when the questionnaire is administered by mail or phone. So this is very very important, because if you do not carefully design and interpret the questionnaire, the answer that you get from the questionnaire, then basically you're going to get the wrong information. So when you design it, you have to carefully design it. You have to double check it, because the receiver of the questionnaire might interpret the questions differently. So if that's the case, then you are not going to get the answer the correct answer or the accurate answer. So this is important. So the second methods of studying others, the techniques that you can use to conduct original research is a site visit. Right? So site visit is I think is very very important because if you use just a questionnaire, then basically words can explain a limited amount of information. But if you go for a site visit, you are going to have the opportunity to see the process in action, uh, and for the face-to-face contact with the best-in-class operator. So, if possible, site visit is very much recommended during benchmarking process. And usually during the site visit, you're going to have a tour of the operation, followed by the discussion period. So during a site visit, you can have a line tour of, let's say, for example, operation, manufacturing operation, and then followed by a meeting where you can discuss what you saw in the line and have clarifying question answered based on your site visit. And it's very much recommended that pre-visit work is essential. Pre-visit work is essential. So visiting the host and the visiting and the host organizations devote time on the site visit. So that's why prior to the visit, sometimes it's very much advisable to use questionnaire first to get initial informations, so that you when during the site visit you know what to look for, and during the discussion you know what to ask, so that you can clarify items that's not clear. Should establish a basis of mutual learning and information sharing as well as rapport. So basically, the other thing that you have to remember when you do a site visit, do expect that the benchmark company will request similar visit in your organizations, right? So you should be open to that, and that should establish a basis for mutual learning between the two organizations and information sharing as well as rapport. So these are the two techniques, and we're going to go to the third techniques after this. The third techniques that you can use if you want to benchmark the organizations by doing original research is focus group. And focus group is basically panels of benchmarking partners brought together to discuss area of mutual interest. So what you do is, let's say for example, if you are in the area of automotive industry, then you want to do some benchmark, then you can identify organizations that you want to benchmark. Let's say for example, Toyota, Honda, so on and so forth. And usually in these organizations, they have their benchmark panels. So you can brought everybody together in one meeting and discuss area of mutual interest. They say, for example, you want to focus on the assembly line process. Then basically you get the group from various organizations that very much familiar with the process and also benchmarking protocol to be in the room and discussed together on that particular issue, which is assembly line. Most often, the panels are comprised of people who have some previous joint benchmarking activity. So usually the people that will participate in such focus group is the one that's one is a content expert in that particular area that you want to discuss. The other one is a person that usually that are familiar with the benchmarking activities. Alternatively, panels can be comprised of customer, suppliers, and members of professional organizations. So you can also have a focus group that have panels that comprised of customer, suppliers, or members of professional organizations. So let's say, for example, if you want to talk about the supply line process in your organizations, then basically when you want to do benchmark, then you can get your customer, your suppliers, and those people that's expert in a supply line to be in a room, which is part of the focus group, and discuss the matter about supply chain process. So this is the third methods, the techniques that you can use for benchmarking of original data, original research. Once you get the data from the either publicly available domain or from your original research that you collect from the benchmark organizations, then you need to analyze the data. You need to learn from the data. So that's step number 5, learning from the data. So learning from the data in a benchmark study involve answering series of questions. So this is a guideline for you in analyzing your data. Based on the data that you get, then you ask these questions, and based on the questions, then basically you're going to form the conclusions out of the data that you collected. So the first question that you can use to to analyze your data is there a gap between the organization's performance and the performance of the best in class? So basically, this is comparing the critical indicators between your organizations and also the best in class. You want to understand if there is any difference in performance or not. Right? So if there is, then what is the gap? So you want to know which area the gap exists. Examples: if you are in the industry, automotive industry, and you're doing benchmark with other automotive industry, some of the indicators may be productivity, quality, so on and so forth, and you compare those indicators, uh, and basically then you define if there is any gap. If there is gap, how much it is, and then you start to ask, no, why is there a gap? So in answering why is there a gap, then basically then you look at the process between the your internal process and the process practiced by the best in class organization. So then you ask the question, what does the best in class do differently that is better than what you are doing, right? And if the best in class practice were adopted, what would be the resulting improvement? So these are the kind of questions that you ask, and the answer should be coming from the data that you collected during the benchmarking process. And based on these questions, then they could be three different outcomes. One is the external process may significantly better than internal process. So this is a negative gap. And if this is the finding, then basically it calls for major improvement efforts on your part. So you have to make sure you have to come up with a plan to improve your internal process such that you can narrow this gap or close the gap. Right? The second possible outcome is the process performance approximately equal. So this is parity. So you might find that maybe the quality with regards to the quality, the competitor is much better than you are. So then that's basically the negative gap. And maybe in terms of productivity, then basically productivity is about the same. So if the process performance approximately equal, then basically it requires further investigation to determine if improvement opportunity exists. And you can to do this, then you can break down the process into sub processes, and some aspect superior and represent significant improvement opportunities. So if it's parity, then you just don't ignore it, but you still have to look into the process a bit more detail. Break it down into sub process. For example, if the productivity is about the same, then you overall productivity is about the same. Then maybe you want to break it down and look at the productivity of every sections in the process. So maybe in the automotive assembly, you can break it down into, let's say, for example, the painting section, the engine mounting sections, door installation sections. So you can break it down into many small sub processes and start to compare the sub processes to see if there is room for you to improve. Okay. And the third possible outcome is the internal process may be better than the external organizations. So this is, we call it positive gap. So finding a positive gap should result in recognitions for the internal process. So there's possibility that when you do benchmark, there are certain areas that your organization performs much better compared to the benchmark organizations, and this is called positive gap. And basically, if you found this, then make sure that you recognize the group of people that's in charge of that particular internal process. So once the gap between your organizations and the benchmark organization has been understood, uh, what you need to do is basically it need to be they need to be quantified and described properly. So the level of details must be sufficient to allow eventual quantification. So basically, the gap and also the reason why there's a gap need to be in detail, such that you can quantify them. For example, the processes determined to be superior should be described using words and graphics to the level of detail necessary so that each step can be understood and emulated. So the reason why this is important, because if you want to embark on the improvement plan, if you want to execute the improvement plan, it must be detailed enough so that you can explain it to other people that's going to do it. Right? So how to do it? Basically, then you need to describe it using words, graphics, so on and so forth. If you had a video, you can use a video, so on and so forth, such that the improvement that you want to propose and implemented is clear enough to be executed. Uh, One way to do this is basically, if you manage to describe the best in class process in detail, then basically you should actually fulfill this requirement. So describing best-in-class process in detail is a primary way to determine why there is a gap and how to close it. So basically, that's part of the learning from the data that you need to do once you identify the gap. So when the best-in-class processes has been described and quantified, as mentioned earlier, you still need to do additional analysis. The purpose of the additional analysis is determine the root cause of the gap. So you know there's a gap between your performance and the performance of the best in class. But you need to really understand the root cause of that particular gaps. You know, why is it? Uh, the gaps result of process practice themselves, generally business practice and organizational and also operational structure. So the gaps can come from various sources. You know, it can be the process themselves or the business practice or the structure, either organizational or operational structure. So judgment is needed to determine what can be done in the relevant planning period to arrive at the appropriate benchmark goal or objective. So then, once you understand the gap, then basically you have to make decisions. You have to make management decisions. What can be done to close the gap? Yeah? Within a specified period of time. So say, let's say, for example, within 1 quarter. You know, what gap can you close? You know, what are the activity that you can implement to close what gap? So that you can set the benchmark goal or objective. So basically, you can say that okay, we're going to improve our let's say for example painting process, and we're going to implement such and such improvement, and it'll be done within 1 quarter. And if we do this, then how much improvement we should be able to realize. So those are the things that need to be analyzed here. And usually, the gap might require the change in your internal process, and that change can be with regards to the process practice or general business practice or organizational and operational structure. And the easiest way to change is basically the process practice. So if the change to address the root cause of the gap is the improvement in the process practice, then this is something that can be done in a short period of time. But if you're talking about the change in general business practice and organizational and operational structure, then this is going to be a long-term project, and it will have a big implication in the overall running of the organization. Right? Um, However, the objective information developed through benchmark studies can offer compelling reason to make the change. So basically, based on the informations that you collected during the benchmark studies, then you can make a decisions whether the big change that's necessary in the general business practice or operational structure is worth pursuing or not, right? So basically, the decision need to be made here at the management level to have a buy-in into what kind of changes going to be made to ensure that the gap between your organizational performance and the benchmark company which is the best in class performance is closed, is narrow or closed. Just to explain a bit more, what's the difference between the process practice, business practice, and also organizational and operational structure. Then let's look into those three categories in a bit more detail. So when you talk about the process practice, basically process practice is basically the methods that make up the process itself. For example, in the customer fulfillment process, that consists of receiving orders, selecting it from warehouse, packaging the order, shipping it, billing it, collecting the payment, updating customer record for instructions for each transaction. So this is examples of the process. What process? This is a customer fulfillment process. If you talk about other process, they say, for example, manufacturing process, then it's a step-by-step methods on how to execute that particular manufacturing process. Uh, as for the business practice, basically there are more general in nature and may apply to many or all the organizational process. So this is something that if you change, it will impact business or overall processes in the organization. Example, personal policy, personal policy and procedures, accounting practice, measurements and reward system. So basically, this will affect overall running of the organization. That's why changing it will take more time and is kind of like long term plan changes or improvement. And for the organizational and operational structure, it has to do with the location of the activities, organizational charts, separation of responsibility and information system capability. So example, if you have a vertical structure in your organization, then maybe based on the benchmarking process, then they suggested a metric structure. So to change the organization will take a lot of planning, and will impact the whole overall organization. Or maybe you want to look at the separation of responsibility. Maybe maybe in terms of reporting structure. So maybe the quality manager is no longer reporting to the factory manager, but report to the corporate, for example, to make sure there is a separation of responsibility and the separation of. So these are the explanation for the three possible area that need to be improved. It can be the process practice, can be a business practice, or can be organizational and also operational structure itself. Okay, so when all the data has been analyzed and basically decision has been made in terms of what need to be implemented, be it the change in the process, a change in the structure, change in the organization, then basically you need to use that finding, especially when the benchmark study reveals a negative gap in performance and the objective is to change the process to close the gap, right? So if the finding is there is a negative gap and nothing being done to close the gap, then basically benchmarking is a waste of time. So you just waste the time, waste resources of doing the benchmark process. And to effect the change, the findings must be well communicated to the people within the organizations who can enable improvement. So the findings of the benchmark can be kept in the file, but it need to be shared, and it need to be shared well to people that's going to execute the change in the organization. And the findings must translate to goals and objectives and action plan, and must be developed to implement new process. So once the decision is made, then basically the findings need to be translated into goals and objective and action plan and timing, so on and so forth, so that the process of making the change can be monitored and evaluated on timely manner. So, in order to implement the proposed change based on the outcome of the benchmark study, there are two group of people that must agree to the change. If they are not, then you have to convince them. The first group basically consists of people who will run the process, who is the process owner. So it's very, very important for you to be able to do this. And this is the reason why the members of the benchmark team, at least one of them, must come from the process owner, of which being benchmark. So especially if there is a big issue found during the benchmarking process. So if found a big issue with regards to a particular process area, then most often than not, the process owner may incline to disbelief of the finding. So it's important for you to explain the result, and also basically explain to them what's the benefits that will be realized once the finding from the benchmark is implemented. Right? So the second group of people that you need to convince is the upper management, because the upper management can enable the process by incorporating the changes into the planning process and providing the necessary resources. So it's very important for you to get a buy-in from the management prior to the benchmarking process itself. So if you manage to do that prior to the benchmarking process, then it's going to be much easier for you to convince the upper management to make the changes based on the finding from the benchmark. So process changes are likely to affect upstream and downstream operation, as well as the suppliers and customers. So whatever you do in the whatever changes that you implement based on the benchmarking process will have either upstream or downstream effect, or both. Right? So because of that, then basically the senior management need to understand it, and senior management has to know the basis for the payoff of the new goals and objective in order to support the change. That's why the findings of the benchmark need to be very objective, such that you have a plan to spell out what are the changes, what are the time frame of the changes, what's the objective, and what is the forecasted outcome and benefits. Changes in business practices and organizational and operational structure may be indicated These changes have to be considered and incorporated into a strategic planning process. So, if the changes that you plan to do based on the findings is related to the business practice or even organization structure, and this will be strategic changes, and basically in order to implement this you must have the blessing and also support from the upper management. If not, you will not be able to change it, right? And since the finding very objective based on the data, supported by the data, the benchmarking process will help to make the case to both groups. So it's much easier to convince both the process owner and also the upper management of the change that you propose if you have evidence, you have a concrete evidence. And the concrete evidence should come from the benchmarking data. The effect of the change can be predicted quantitatively and the process fully described. So this is why it's very important for the findings of the benchmark to be well documented, so that you can predict the outcome quantitatively, and you can describe the process that you intend to change clearly. So once you manage to convince the two groups, the process owner and also the senior management of your organizations, to make the changes based on the finding from the benchmarking process, then you can start implementing the change. And in implementing the change, it is proposed uh, generic steps for the development and executions of the action plan to carry out the findings. And the generic steps here is quite self-descriptive. So you specify the task, the define the sequence of the task, which one to do first, which one to do second, so on and so forth. You have to determine the resources needed. So this can be the human resources, or the money, the fund that's needed to implement the change. Right? Since you got the approval and support from the senior management, this shouldn't be an issue. If you have not received a support from the senior management, then this will be going to be difficult to do. Right? And then you come up with a task schedule. So you can have a Gantt chart, basically to monitor the progress of your changes. Assign responsibility for each of the tasks. So based on the resources that you have, you can assign responsibility for the task to be carried out, and you have to describe what is the expected result clearly, so that you can monitor it, whether the changes resulted in the outcome that you expect or not. And specify methods for the monitoring results. So you might want to have a task force for this, and there'll be some senior people in there to actually review the progress of the project implementation in either weekly or monthly basis, depending on the what they call it, the action items that you want to implement. Okay? And you have to remember that benchmarking is a continuous improvement tools. So it's not done once to create one permanent improvement, and thereby miss the opportunity for future improvement. So you have to remember that this benchmarking process is continuous improvement tools. You have to do it every so often, so that you can compare yourself against your competitor or against the best in class. so that you won't become complacent with your current performance. So again, you have to remember that benchmarking must be used continuously to pursue emerging new ideas. The reason being is to continuously improve your performance. So we have covered the 6 steps of benchmarking process, and basically, if you follow that guideline, you should be able to perform the benchmarking process quite decently. Um, uh, there is a pitfalls and criticism of benchmarking process, because the idea of benchmarking basically is you want to define somebody who perform better than you are, and then you imitate what that company or that organization does, right? So that's the basics idea of benchmarking. So the criticism based on the definitions of benchmark is on the idea of copying others, right? So the criticism is basically how an organization be truly superior if it does not innovate to get ahead of the competitor. So if you just copy somebody else, then how do you get ahead, right? How do you become the best in that particular industry? But you can also ask the reverse. How can an organizations even survive if it lost track of its external environment? So one of the benefits of benchmarking is you would know where's your standing among the competitors, among your peers in the industry. So if you didn't do a benchmark, then how can you survive? Because you won't be able to understand the your competitor, right? Benchmark is still important. Benchmark is still important. Um, and you have to remember that benchmark is not a strategy or business philosophy. It's a tool. It's an improvement tool for you to continuously improve your performance. Right? And it can be effective if used properly. Benchmark isn't very helpful if it's used for processes that don't offer much opportunity for improvement. So if you I cannot think of a process that cannot be improved, but so if you are dealing with such processes that do not have any much room for improvement, then benchmark is not a proper tools for you. Um, Benchmark it breaks down if process owners and managers feel threatened or do not accept and act on the finding. So the key things in the benefits of the benchmark can only be realized if the process owner and also the managers can be open-minded and accept the proposed changes based on the comparison between your organizations and others, right? If they are not willing to do so, then basically you won't get any benefits from benchmarking process, right? And as mentioned earlier, benchmark is also not a substitute for innovation. However, it is a source of ideas from outside of the organization. So you have to remember, you still, even though you perform the benchmarking process, you still have to innovate. You still have to innovate. Business success depends on setting and achieving goals and objectives Benchmarking forces an organizations to set goals and objectives based on external realities. So basically, you still have to innovate. You cannot just copy other companies to be ahead of them. But what benchmark do is basically it will tells you where you are, and it will guide you in setting goals and objectives based on your competitor, based on what's out there, what's the best industry. So we have covered the steps for benchmarking process. There are six of them, and basically those six are generic steps. And most often than not, organizations will actually devise their own process, create and their own benchmarking process, but it won't be that far away from the six steps that we go through just now. So this, for example, this is the AT&T benchmarking process. So altogether, it has project conception, planning, preliminary data collections, best in class selections, best in class data collections, assessment, implementation planning, implementation, and recalibration. So basically, if you look at the steps that's defined by AT&T, you can actually associate these steps with the six steps that we covered just now. Other than that, we have also examples from Xerox. So Xerox has 12 steps of benchmarking process rather than six steps. So it started with planning, phase one, planning, identify what to benchmark, identify comparative companies, determine data collections method, and collect data. Second phase is analysis, determine current performance gap, project future performance level, and then you have integrations where you communicate findings and gain acceptance, establish a functional group, and phase four, action, where you develop the action plan, implement specific actions and monitor progress, recalibrate benchmarks. And phase five, they call it maturity, attained leadership positions, fully integrate practice into process. So basically, these are two examples of how uh, benchmark steps is being defined and performed by AT&T and also Xerox. Basically, the generic six steps that we discussed just now is the basis for the AT&T and also Xerox benchmarking process. So we just completed the lecture on benchmarking process. So a few things that you have to remember that the benchmarking process is only a tool for continuous improvement. It's not a substitute to innovation. So the company has still to innovate in order to be the best in the industry. But benchmarking will actually give you some ideas in terms of your positioning in the industry, and give some very objective way to set your goals so that you can improve your performance continuously.